Good morning. Welcome to Shawnee Mission Unitarian Universalist Church. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome here. We are so happy that you have chosen this YouTube channel, this Sabbath, this sanctuary in time. We know that you have so many options on Sunday morning, and that you chose to be here is something that we celebrate. We extend an especially warm welcome to our visitors and anyone who may be watching our service online for the first time. Please complete our Get in Touch online form by clicking the link below in our video description. We now invite everyone to greet each other in any way you possibly can. Elbows if you're here, and if you're joining us online, please say hi in the chat.
Thank you. It is good to be together. Good morning. I have just a few announcements. Each year on the Sunday before Halloween, we have a special service to honor our loved ones who have passed and focus on grief as an important space for our spiritual wellness. We invite you to bring a photo of your lost loved one on October 30th for our altar, which we will put right here. And we invite you to invite your friends and family who you know are struggling with grief to join us for a special hour meant to support them in processing their grief, even the most complicated of grief. Secondly, this Wednesday, October 19th at 6 p.m., the 8th Principal and Congregational Life teams would like to invite you to a screening of the film Rebel Hearts here in the sanctuary. This documentary follows a group of rebellious nuns. Do we have any ex-rebellious nuns here today? We all know some. This is a group of rebellious nuns in the 1960s who stood up to the patriarchy of the Catholic Church to fight for equality and justice. Right on. This event is open to all, so feel free to invite your friends and family, and it'll be Wednesday night, so there will be childcare. And now lastly, I am pleased to announce that Jen Lacey, our interim director of Lifespan Religious Education, has officially been hired on as a permanent fixture in our staff. Today, our Sunday service is all about the importance of questions. So to start us off and to celebrate her, she has prepared for us a love letter to Unitarian Universalism.
Recently, I was sitting with Rev Rose, and I mentioned that I was struggling with the idea of prayer. I had questions about its purpose, what happens when you pray, and how to do it. These questions troubled me because at one point in my life, I was so sure about prayer. Now I had so many questions. Most of my religious experiences have taken place in churches where everyone always seemed to have the answers. How do you pray? What is my purpose? What happens when you die? The leaders of these churches always pointed to a place in the Bible to show me my answer. Everything was always black or white, or right or wrong. There was no need to question anything. In fact, questioning might be considered a sign of lack of faith. This space of certainty, however, did not last long. I learned new philosophical and scientific ideas that blew my previously held answers to pieces. For many years, I felt spiritually lost as I tried to reconcile my old beliefs with new questions. Until SMUUCh, I avoided most religious institutions. Shortly after I took this position, Rev Rose went on vacation. The church shut down due to COVID, and I found myself alone in the prairie. Before me was a transcendence portal built by artists and members of this church. The portal said, "Think of something you want to transcend or change. As you cross over the threshold, hold that new reality in your heart." More than anything, I wanted to improve my spiritual health in community with you all, transcending religious answers and binary thinking. Since stepping through that portal door, I have encountered a brave community of people who are not afraid to ask questions and admit that they don't have all the answers. Each week, I listen to sermons that challenge me to expand my understanding of my own ecological relationships, that flip biblical stories on their head and question who has power and agency. Unitarian Universalism encourages me to explore new theologies, each giving me a new lens to ask different kinds of questions. In eighth principle meetings, I encounter people who openly question how white supremacy has shaped their lives, the institutions that benefit them and not others, and the biases that still shape the way they interact with the world. But most of my questions have taken place in the presence of our youth, perhaps because this was the age when my first spiritual and existential questions were formed. My first encounter with our youth was overwhelming. I have never met a group of young people who literally glow with freedom. The freedom to be themselves, the freedom to question everything, especially the binaries where I felt safe during my adolescent development. In their presence, I want to liberate my own curious inner child. With all my questioning so far, I have found some UU truths. One, nothing is outside of the realm of possibility at UU churches, including portals. Asking questions is encouraged and good for our spiritual health. And three, I love this church, and I am grateful to be a part of this questioning UU community. Thank you.
In his Young People's Concerts, Leonard Bernstein says, "So you see, the meaning of music is in the music, in its melodies and in the rhythms and the harmonies, and the way it's orchestrated, and most important of all, in the way it develops itself." But that's a whole other program. We'll talk about that some other time. Right now, all you have to know is that music has its own meanings, right there for you to find inside the music itself. And you don't need any stories or any pictures to tell you what it means. If you like music at all, you'll find out the meanings for yourselves just by listening to it. Come, let us worship, knowing that our lives are an endless song with all the questions, wonderment, loss, and beauty. Please rise as you are willing and able for hymn number 346, Come Sing a Song with Me.
As Cleo Green comes forward to light our chalice, we invite you to join us as we recite our covenant. Let us affirm that love is the doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with one another.
You may know that yesterday we hosted a well-attended children's opera here in this very room. You also may know that our own Neil Long commissioned and organized this opera through his work as the Director of Education and Community Engagement at the Lyric Opera of Kansas City. For our themed reflection today, he will be telling us a little bit about his process around the creation of this opera.
When I was tasked with developing a comprehensive opera education program in my position with Lyric Opera, I knew that the programming at the elementary school level was an essential component. For most elementary school students, seeing an opera in school is the first entry point to our beloved art form. That being said, whether they know it or not, kids do recognize opera from cartoons, movies, and video games. The challenge is that these presentations set opera apart as something other, or something to be made fun of, or as something only for the elite. And the latter stereotype has unfortunately been proven true by history. But it is my belief that opera is for all. We all tell stories, and opera tells stories through music, and reminds us that our colorful lives flow on in endless song. The industry answer to elementary school opera programming is largely to present an adaptation of a grown-up work or a decidedly kid story in a large-scale assembly format. Granting organizations that fund such programs tend to care about numbers reached more than impact. Many of the touring operas that are out there on the market speak down to children, and it is my belief that children should not be spoken down to. Thus, we endeavored to create a checklist of 4 qualities that we were looking for in a touring elementary school opera. 1, musical accessibility. 2, curricular alignment. 3, social emotional learning. And 4, interactivity. Finding no works that checked all 4 boxes, we turned to commissioning, writing a new opera. The process of commissioning an opera on an extremely short timeline was nerve-wracking and required courage from all parties involved. I wanted to tell a story that speaks to everyone in the room and that creates space for dialogue about the endless number of feelings that have crawled to the surface since COVID appeared in our world almost 3 years ago. We engaged composer and librettist Rachel J. Peters to write for us. We went back and forth reviewing well over 50 ideas, but the idea that made the strongest impact and ended up becoming the opera that was here yesterday at SMUUCh and has been to schools in Kansas City, will reach over 3,000 students total, was based on an unpublished children's book by Bill Fullman entitled Life is a Jar of Paint. We had to teach the music curriculum, so that required shifting some things around in the story, which Rachel handled brilliantly. And we ended up with a story about an 8.5-year-old boy, Ollie, who is questioning the meaning of life after the death of his grandmother. Commissioning a work, handling the logistics of a new production, developing the curriculum, workshopping the piece is a big job. But through it all, I began to see myself in Ollie. Ollie is a sensitive and precocious boy. He has a lot of questions, and he's frustrated when grown-ups, even his parents, don't hear him. I can relate to Ollie on a number of levels. 8.5 was a trying time for me. A young queer boy with no words to describe my identity, and no grown-up with a listening, non-judgmental ear. From all directions, I received messages to not be sensitive, to not ask questions, to not speak in a girly voice, to dress like a boy, to play sports, to pursue music only as a hobby. These messages hurt, and the wounds are still partially open. What I'm proud of about this opera is that Ollie can be any of us. We are all questioning the meaning of life on a variety of levels, and we all need grown-ups who hear us. Ollie felt heard by his Aunt Lisa, a composer. And how proud I am of Aunt Lisa as a well-developed character. As Rachel Peters, the composer and librettist, pointed out to us, in our opera world, mezzo-sopranos are often resigned to playing, quote, witches, bitches, whores, and britches. Aunt Lisa is anything but. She's not married, she's not a mother, she's not defined by sex, and her work as a composer brings her joy, yet is not competing with her family for attention. As we continue bringing Sketchbook for Ollie to schools and spaces in our community, it is my hope and realization that young people, and those young at heart, can see themselves in the characters just a few feet away on the stage. Last week, when presenting the opera at a school, one of the young women in the audience called me over at the end. She said it was difficult watching the show. Why? I asked. Because my grandpa and grandma just died. I took a breath and asked, "How did watching the show make you feel?" "Brave," she said, without missing a beat.
At this time, I'd like to invite the children to the front for Time for All Ages. Welcome. I want to start with a question, and this is a question for everyone. Do you remember a time when you were little when you asked your parents a difficult question? And how did they respond? We have many questions because we're curious people. Rev Rose and Neil, can you think of a time when you asked a parent a difficult question and how they responded?
I really can't. As I just kind of shared, I felt growing up that I wasn't able to ask adults in my life difficult questions, so I just kind of kept it to myself.
I have a memory. So my mom had 2 miscarriages before Arthur and I were born. And I remember asking her if I was those miscarried babies. Trying to figure out, who was I and what was my soul or my consciousness. And I remember she just looked really sad and said, "I don't know." And that was enough for me.
When we lose someone in our life, or a pet, or maybe even a favorite toy, or a friend moves away, we may experience grief, just like Ollie in the opera yesterday. And grief is kind of like a messy ball of feelings and questions. So I have this ball of yarn, and the different colors represent different feelings, and then I have some difficult questions or big questions attached. Is anyone curious about a feeling and a question? You would like to pull one of the strings. Which one do you want to pull? All right. What do you think what do you think of when you think of a blue feeling? He pulled the blue piece of yarn. Calm. And would you like to read the question on the piece of paper?
What is life?
He said, "What is life?" You want to pull one? Pull a piece of paper. I don't know if there's a... Yeah, there you go. All right, you pulled the green string. Can you think of a green feeling?
I don't know.
You don't know. That's all right. Sometimes we don't know feelings.
Maybe like you're feeling like gross or something.
Gross, okay.
And you can be really nice, and you can feel the green sound.
Oh, yeah. And would you like to read what's on the paper?
Why is this happening to me?
She said, "Why is this happening to me?" So we're not going to answer these questions today, but it's good to ask these questions. Yeah, you want to pull one? Which one? All right. What can you think of another blue feeling?
Probably sad.
Sad. Yeah, so far I've heard calm and sad, and sometimes we just feel green, right? And what does your question say?
Do people know when they die?
Yeah, so that's a difficult question we may ask. And so in Unitarian Universalism, we focus on these types of questions. We may not always have an answer, but it's still important to ask them. And there's also power in saying, I don't know. I want you all to know that if you have questions, feel free to ask your family, friends, Rev Rose, or me at any time. All right, at this time, I would like you to join me in singing the children out to their classes.
This is the time in our service where we draw to heart and mind those in our midst who are suffering and those who feel the sweet relief of their burdens easing. We give our love to those untangling themselves from relationships that no longer serve them. We grieve for the loss of energy and time that chronic illness takes upon the body. And our hearts go out to all who are struggling to make ends meet, especially as the weather grows colder. We extend our gratitude to people who make caring for children their primary spiritual practice, and we join in wonder with all people who are bravely facing their final days. And as always, we rejoice over the exquisite beauty in this world, as small or life-changing as each piece of beauty might be. I now invite you to come forward and briefly share in 2 to 3 sentences a rare joy or a profound sorrow and light a candle. You first.
Well, I just wanted to announce that in a couple of days, my wife is making a vainglorious attempt to catch up with me. She will turn 80 years old.
This is a mix of joys and sorrows combined, I guess, because a lot of things just happen at the same time. I've had a few very difficult weeks, both for work, personal life. A family member had a serious health scare, but I got through things. My family member is completely okay and is going to be okay. And so I'm on the other end of some big struggles, so I'm glad. And I'm very grateful for my family member too.
I'm lighting this candle for my mom and Jackie. My mom and Jackie are married, and they were together for 30 years before they actually got married. And then at the end of August, they both got COVID. We all got COVID. And so they've been in and out of the hospital for the past month. So this has been a struggle of long COVID, but Jackie's out of the hospital, and my mom is currently in rehab. So things are looking up, but I'm lighting this candle so that for strength for them to get better from what they're suffering from.
I'm Mark Hines, and I'd actually like to light 2 of them. One's a candle of just gratitude for healing. I woke up 33 months ago, I guess a month before COVID, deaf with severe vertigo, and spent 15 months isolated, and in that process it developed this other migraine phenomenon. So spent 15 months functionally deaf, couldn't walk without assistance, really couldn't talk to you on the phone, had crazy loud tinnitus, like I describe it as Chief Stadium loud, and took a long time to heal all that. Went for my first hike in the woods the other day, can stand on 1 foot. I mean, it's just been a long journey, and I'm profoundly grateful for a whole lot of great medical care and a lot of love from Lynn and some compassion from Reverend Rose too. And then ironically, in that conversation with Reverend Rose, that chat turned into, I'm going to be sharing the honor of being at the pulpit next week talking about healing and overcoming childhood sexual abuse, which is really an honor So I look forward to sharing that next week as well.
I'm going to light a candle for Reverend Rose today. Last Sunday was National Clergy Appreciation Sunday, and the Congregational Life Committee had planned to bring flowers to her, which they did, but she wasn't here. They placed them on her desk. But anyway, I appreciate you so much, Reverend Rose, and the things that Dr. Jens just said, I think radiates from you out to us, and you're appreciated and loved. I'll light this candle for you. There we go. And I'm shaking.
I light all the rest of the candles for the joys and sorrows that remain unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. And now I invite you to put your feet flat on the floor, your hands in your lap. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath into your belly. Allowing the hubbub of arriving at church to melt away. Seeing if you can follow your breath from the very top of the breath to the very bottom. Checking in with your body. Are there places where you feel pain? Are there places where you feel pinched? No pain, warmth, peace, jitters. In this moment, let us become present to some of our questions. I invite you to turn your mind to any questions you have brewing within you today. If there's been something on your mind, can you turn it into a question? We ask not for our questions to be answered, but for the bravery to sit in the uncertainty. We let go of our desire for assuredness and seek instead the peace to live this human life through with all our wonderment, loss, and beauty. We come into the present moment, bringing with us all the uncertainties of life, letting them rest beside us as we express gratitude for this moment. Come back once more to those questions in your heart. Allow yourself to sit within that unknowing, revel in it. For this is what it is to be alive, to be human. Let the corners of your lips turn up. You may open your eyes. Blessed be, and amen. Now please remain seated for our meditative hymn, How Could Anyone Ever Tell You?
Our first reading summarizes the progression of questions that Ollie asks in Sketchbook for Ollie. These words are by Rachel Peters, composer and librettist of the opera. To Mom, immediately after Grandma's funeral. What is life? Where is Grandma? What does it all mean? To Dad, you and I and Mom are here, but if it's not forever, what's the point of all that we go through? Ollie is not satisfied with their evasive answers. He says, you know what would make me feel lucky? If you listened to me. Ollie gets in the car to go to Aunt Lisa's house. How long till we get there? He asks. Long enough for you to sleep in the car, Mom replies, evaded again. To Aunt Lisa, what is life? Where is Grandma? Why do we all die? I don't know why Grandma's gone, and if it's not forever, what's the point of all that we go through? Ollie's questions become more revealing. Aunt Lisa explains life's temporality through music and composing. Ollie gets some upsetting clarity. If life is a music sketchbook we write as we're going along, then different amounts of pages means some people barely make music at all. That's so sad, so unfair. That is the worst answer. I'm going to have a euphemism in my arteries. Aunt Lisa, listening intently, says, you mean an aneurysm. The music continues and builds, and Ollie reaches a boiling point. Stop the music. It's too loud, too fast, too much. No patience, kids or students of my own. I can't make grown-up music till I'm grown. None of it brings Grandma back, not 1,000 things you do. Once I'm ready to begin, you'll get old and leave me too. If I write all this music, fill my sketchbook, but no one who loves me is there, why should I start? Why should I bother? Why should I care? Aunt Lisa calmly says, so many feelings bubbling inside you, right to the top now. That's what makes you human. That's what makes your music. Our second reading comes from the Buddhist teacher, Pema Chodron, from her book that is titled Comfortable with Uncertainty, 108 Teachings on Cultivating Fearlessness and Compassion. She says, we spend all our energy and waste our lives trying to recreate zones of safety around us, which are always falling apart. As we practice moving into the present moment this way, we become more familiar with a fresh state of being that is available to us on an ongoing basis. This moving away from comfort and security, this stepping out into what is unknown, uncharted, and shaky, that's called liberation.
What are we? Where did we come from? What is consciousness? What will happen to me in my lifetime? Why are some people's lives so short? These are some of the timeless questions that have swirled through each of our heads, existential, unanswerable questions that children, and we when we were children, wondered over. Question asking is one of the themes we explored just yesterday here in the sanctuary, when the Traveling Children's Opera presented us with a program about the ways children struggle and grapple with life's big questions. The main character, as you've heard, is Ollie, whose grandmother has died, and he finds himself caught in a frayed and warpy world, lonely and full of questions building up behind his eyes and in his throat. But no one can really seem to answer them. But, as we mentioned earlier in the service, these are not questions that we only had when we were children. If you were to Google theological questions, guess what they would be? Why are we here? What happens when we die? Where did we all come from? What is consciousness? All those same questions. Now, it may be that you were encouraged in your development as a child to ask these questions. Or it may be that you were taught in subtle ways, like Ollie, that these types of questions were to be discouraged. Perhaps in your faith communities or your families or your schools. There are many ways that our world tries to help us by giving us answers, assuring us that the world is either good or bad, safe or scary, when really each of our lives brings ups and downs, losses, times of uncertainty, happiness, peace, and distress. Yes, the unknown is indeed uncomfortable. These big unanswerable questions pointing to that uncertainty. And in response to this discomfort, there is an element in our collective psyche that is reacting to discomfort in a way that ferociously is seeking answers. Remember what Pema Chodron said, that we all spend our energy and waste our lives trying to recreate zones of safety, even when they are always falling apart. For too often, we become obsessed with answers. As a society, we are so focused on pinning it down into an answer. It is nearly impossible to engage with the world, let alone the news media right now, without becoming inundated with fears about the future and being swept up in the longing for a sense of safety in a world as chaotic and dystopic as this one. When perhaps we ought to come back to the place of uncertainty as one of spiritual wellness and work with our question asking as the starting point towards spiritual health. Because what happens when we do disengage from those questions? We become discouraged. We lose heart. This discouragement is what happened for little Ollie, who had quite a few questions on his heart about how his grandmother died and what happened to her afterward, and no one will engage those questions. When he asked his dad where his grandma was, his dad said, "We'll just throw a ball around when you get home." And when he asked his mom, she tried to distract him with funny flavors of jelly beans. Even as his anxiety and sadness mount, the people around him are not able to hold such questions for him, not even enough to look him in the eyes and say, "I don't know," which is, of course, a fine way to respond to a child asking you the world's hardest, impossible, unanswerable existential question. This pushes Ollie out into a space of a deeper and more profound loneliness and frustration, which you see in the play as he starts to scream and yell and run around, with this sense that his question asking is somehow profoundly wrong, or his curiosities about the world undesirable, and in this way, his spirit does become discouraged. This is why it is so important that we have spaces that encourage question asking, not only as an integral part of life, not only as a life skill, but as the foundation for faith development. For question asking is one of the most important things that anybody can do at church. For if a fish in a fishbowl this big only grows this long, If you put it in a pond with all the room to move around and expand, it becomes 10 times bigger. It is vital for each of our spirits, like the little fish, to be encouraged to swim within the difficulties of wonderment over being human. For it is in the question asking that we find the most health and the greatest wisdom. Unitarian Universalism dares not fence the spirit. And as a non-creedal faith that encourages the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, we are clear that it is in the searching and the reaching that we find the growth, not in the assuredness of an answer which may give us peace temporarily, but will ultimately teach us to fear uncertainty and abhor the discomfort of being human. For the world is by nature uncertain. All things and all people shall pass. So even if we have those answers, we will find those same questions circling back around anyways, only the answers now will be worn thin, and our ability to withstand life and all its ups and downs waning. This is a concept not just important to Unitarian Universalism, but is the basis for Buddhist philosophy as well, that we must unhook from our desire to know the future and instead do the radically heartening thing to sit within those questions, see the love and beauty that surrounds us now, work with what exists, play with it, live into it, letting go of the desire to know those answers, and instead sit in that unknown. Now, of course, the state of grieving is one of the most painful experiences a human can have, and one of the states of being that is ripe with questions. When there is a shift as dramatic as a grandmother-shaped hole in the universe, a wife-shaped hole, when a child who was once here is now not, the space of grief is one that most needs non-judgmental companions who will witness one's questions and specifically not try to answer them, but instead engage with those questions creatively. And this is what eventually found little Ollie in his lost state. His Aunt Lisa, who is a musician with a fabulous studio full of homemade and worldly instruments and a special, beautiful sketchbook full of her life's songwriting, Aunt Lisa begins to engage Ollie in play and in music. She does the important work of simply sitting with these questions until his deeper questions can be given voice. She teaches him that even when those two thick vertical lines at the bottom of the sheet of music signals that the song is over, even after we die, our life's music continues playing. And in this way, each of our lives is like an endless song. Sometimes our song is sad, sometimes it's angry, sometimes it's a lullaby or punk or funny or intense and glorious as a symphony. She encourages him, she gives him heart, gives him the strength to continue to stay alive, to be curious and be open to life, to not be zeroed in on finding those answers, but instead to dive into the unknown and make something out of it. Make music, however your music takes shape. The play lets us know that your music might be mathematical, it might be poetry, it might be in relationship, it might be football. Let us rejoice then that our lives are like an endless song, in a melody that is uncertain and growing as each day unfolds. Let us endeavor then to find the strength to live this human life with all its ups and downs and find the beauty along the way. For if we can express about life, if we can either literally or proverbially make music about our lives, or see our lives as ongoing music or poetry or art, we will be liberated into a depth of our present experience in an uncertain world, rather than fighting reality and trying to pin it down. Imagine being freed from your anxieties about the future. Imagine being freed from your desire to know. Imagine being freed from being obsessed with what will happen with climate change or Donald Trump or those test results or that family member. Imagine purposefully and theologically as part of our spiritual practice moving away from that urge towards comfort and security and instead stepping out into what is unknown, uncharted, and shaky. That's called liberation. To engage with life as it truly is right now, there is a freedom. To find a space of peace amidst that discomfort, that's called beauty. To make friends and form bonds around this pursuit of spiritual wellness, that's called a beloved community. To sing our lives as though it were a song, this would be what it means to have lived a life well. So let us rededicate ourselves to life, each of our lives as an endless song. What would your song be today? At times sorrowful, at times joyous, at times dissonant, at times melodic, but one that is engaged with those great questions, going deeper, liberated from the desire to force safety and instead robust enough to engage in this thing called being human. To honor our child mind and come into a state of curiosity and wonder as we traverse this hurting world. For we can each be as free as Ollie, when he no longer is seeking answers to his questions, but instead is writing music about his grandmother, silly songs about her love of cheese, sad songs about how much he misses her. He's let go of finding those answers and is now engaged in making the music of his life. As his Aunt Lisa says, everything makes music, but the most important music comes from you. Imagine the music you could make within those big questions you have. Imagine the music you could make in every interaction, through every moment, singing your humanness as if it were an endless song full of questions, wonderment, joy, grief, sorrow, and you, a composer. For the most important music comes from you. Blessed be, and amen.
The work of the church depends on us and our songs, our generosity of time, wisdom, and financial resources. We invite you to give generously to support the ongoing work of the church. The offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared values. Please join me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us in our hearts until we are together again. Please rise as you are willing and able for our closing hymn, number 108, My Life Flows On.
You compose in all you do. You always have, you always could. Write your song of love and truth. You'll always be on solid ground. Tiny questions often have 1,000 answers, and all are sound. Go in peace.